What up, sports fans? Waxon Wednesday. Jake Waxman Talalava. Let's get this show on the road. Sorry for this show being very, very late. So, tonight we're going to start with fantasy football talk. We're coming up on the NFL season. Preseason's coming up. And I know there are people out there. I know some of you are out there trying to decide, should I join a new league this year? Should I continue to be a league manager this year? Who should I invite to join my league, or whose league should I join? You're thinking all these things through at the moment. Believe me, I'm thinking it through. I can relate to you there if you're still thinking about it. But I'm not here to give you advice on whether or not you should join a fantasy football league. That's up to you. But I'm here to give you some advice about 3 pieces of advice when it comes to, draft night. There's going to be, more than likely, you're going to be in a draft. Sometimes you might have a lottery system in that draft, but most drafts are like, a snake, which is what I like to do. So I'm going to give you 3 pieces of advice when it comes to draft night. The first advice is, first round, I would draft either a wide receiver or a running back. One of those two. If you're in like the upper half of the first round, so let's say you got a field of 10 who are going to draft. You got a snake draft going, you got 10 people drafting total. If you have picked somewhere between 1 to 5 in terms of the picks, I'd probably go running back. Now, 6 through 10, then you're thinking wide receiver. You can go either way, though, for either one of those. Just depends on how you're feeling. But no matter where you're drafting from, the recommendation that I would give is take either a wide receiver or a running back with your first round pick. That is what I would do, because those are the kinds of players that are going to give you the greatest overall value. Some people like to go quarterback first, which is fine. It's not something I would advise, but there are people that will go out there and do it. But if you're looking for the best value possible, or looking for the best chance of hitting on your first round pick, a wide receiver or a running back gives you the best chance to do that. Second piece of advice: build depth at either the running back or the wide receiver position, okay? So the thing is, regardless of which way you go, whether you get a running back first or a wide receiver first, try to build depth at those positions. Like if you draft a wide receiver first, try to build depth at the wide receiver position. If it's running back for you, get yourself as many great backs as you can. Build depth, because you're going to have 2 starting running backs. Then you're going to have a flex position, which could be either a wide receiver or a running back. I wish it included a tight end, by the way, but it doesn't. There's no rule for that. So build depth at that position, so that way when you have your first 2 wide receivers or first 2 running backs, and then either one of those 2 to fill the flex position. That's another recommendation I would make. And then finally, third and final piece of tip I will give you: don't get too preoccupied with drafting a quarterback early, okay? If you don't end up with your guy, never the end of the world, all right? Quarterbacks can be hit or miss week in and week out, And the thing to keep in mind is defenses have caught up with NFL offenses in this decade. So, and even with guys like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and even Joe Burrow, who can put up some really big numbers, I'll even throw in Jared Goff. The thing is, defenses have really upped their game, and hence the Philadelphia Eagles. And even last season, the quarterbacks were kind of hit and miss last year. So, keeping all that in mind, don't get too preoccupied with drafting a quarterback early. Get him when you can. I would recommend no higher than, say, the 4th to 5th round. But if you don't get the guy you want, just remember, plenty of good, solid quarterbacks out there, and how good your team is, it will come down to your wide receiver and running back rooms, because that's where you can start the most pieces. So, all right, I know basic advice, but some tips here to help those who are new to fantasy football, but also those who are returning to fantasy football and are just trying to figure out how best to work out the situation, how best to go through the progressions of fantasy football. So those are 3 tips I have for you, for all those playing fantasy football, and even all those new to fantasy football, or those making a return. But just remember, whatever you decide to do, completely up to you. Just giving you some tips, because I enjoy this part of fantasy football, or at least the draft part of it. And always stay focused during draft night, and make sure you're aware of where your key pieces are at and who you still available for you to draft. Stuff to keep in mind. All right, anyway, shifting gears. Okay, Whew, we haven't even gotten to college football. We haven't even gotten to rivalry week in college football. We're not even close. And things are already, get this, things are getting spicy between Indiana football and Purdue football. Barry Odom, he hasn't even started his first season as the head coach of the Purdue Boilermakers, and he's already embracing the rivalry with Indiana. Earlier this week, he took a shot at Curt Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers. And in case you're wondering, it was a matter of pretty much it was just a matter of scheduling, because the thing is, just this week, Indiana announced it had canceled a home and away series with Virginia football, who's a solid program. And with that series being canceled, Indiana now is going to be playing in the next few seasons the fewest Power 4 opponents of anyone, I think, in the nation, as far as I know. And at least anyone in the Big Ten. So, Barry Odom had plenty to say about Indiana football canceling that series with Virginia. He said, here's some things I'll state that he said. I could take the approach of one of the other schools in the state and cancel games, do some of these things, but the schedule is what it is, Odom said. We're going to try and get as good as we can and go and win those games. And he also said so Indiana has just 2 Power 4 opponents on the schedule in the same window from 2025 to 2028. And then Odom admitted to playing it, all that stuff. Okay. Odom also acknowledges that teams have to find a balance trying to schedule some quality non-conference games to keep fans interested. How do you set yourself up for an opportunity to build confidence? Get as many players as you can early playing time. There's no substitute for experience, Odom said. So, however we can get our team built to be successful in non-conference. If we can get those games early in the season, I think that's part of it. But it's so important that you have games that your fan base is excited about. Winning football will always get people excited. I've got to build this team. It doesn't matter who is on the schedule right now. We've got to play winning football. So Odom understands the task at hand. So here's, to kind of put it briefly into words, what he's saying is, there's got to be a balance between, having opponents that you can contend with, but also playing opponents on your schedule that your fan base can get excited about, especially if you beat them. And that other thing is, so that's what Odom's getting at with Indiana football. They've scheduled opponents that they know they should be, but they've also scheduled opponents that the Hoosier fan base is not going to get all that excited about, nor is the media. So here's the thing. At Purdue, Indiana and Purdue, they schedule their football games differently. Same with basketball. Indiana, personally, you know what? This is just my opinion, but Indiana, they tend to schedule a lot of cupcakes. All right? Not holding that back, Indiana schedules a lot of easy opponents. Whereas Purdue, they try to schedule on both football and basketball as many tough opponents as they can, as many quality opponents as they can get. Because win or lose, scheduling a quality opponent allows you to learn more about yourself, and you test yourself against the best. And that's the thing that Odom's getting at. And that's why he's taking a shot at Indiana, because Indiana, they're a very good program right now. Curt Cignetti's got them heading in the right direction. But how's that Hoosier program going to get better or continue to grow if they continue playing easy opponents as opposed to quality opponents? That's the point that Odom is trying to raise up. You want to have opponents that gets your fan base excited. And having easy opponents on the schedule, it's hard to get your fan base excited, because you should win those games. That's what Odom is alluding to, and I like that he's not holding anything back on this, because here's the thing. Indiana, okay, Indiana made the play. You can say whatever you want about Purdue. Terrible football team last year. They did, however, have a hard schedule, but they were not a good football team. All right. Indiana, okay, great football team, made the playoffs, deservedly so, but also they did have an easy schedule, and their schedule this year, it's about the same. Like, their non-conference schedule is ridiculously easy, especially after canceling the series with Virginia. Now, from what I heard, Curt Cignetti responded to it. He said, like, a light switch flicked and then it flicked off. Like, he didn't think too much about it, and he only thought about it for a few seconds. So, as expected, Curt Cignetti doesn't think about those things, or isn't thinking too much about it. But also Signetti also responded to criticism from others saying that about Indiana's paper soft schedule going forward. And he said, we're trying to take the SEC approach. We're trying to schedule easy because the SEC teams have been getting away with scheduling easy opponents for years. Kurt Signetti's a great coach, but I hate to burst his bubble, but there's a little thing called SEC bias, okay? Because so many SEC teams get into the playoffs every year or get spots, even with easy schedules, because the NCAA has SEC bias. Now the Big Ten, I believe, is a better conference. No question about it. Of course, Ohio State won the championship last year. But the thing is, the NCAA is always going to be in love with the SEC, all right? They're always going to have that bias. So I hate to tell this to Curt Cignetti, but Indiana is not in the SEC, all right? They're not going to get that same love that the SEC is. Now, they got in the playoffs last year. Their only loss, of course, going into the playoffs would be to the eventual national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, and then they lose in the playoffs to Notre Dame, who was the runner-up. So the point is, you got in because you lost to a quality opponent. But the wins, okay, and as good as of a team as Indiana was last year, they really didn't have that exciting win, with the exception of the victory they got against Michigan. That got them their 10th win of the season. Simple. But this year, it's going to be different. You're expected to win now, because Curt Cignetti, okay, you got a program built. But point is, you're not going to get the same treatment with an easy schedule as SEC teams do. So it's imperative that Indiana, going forward, start thinking about scheduling tougher opponents after, like, say, 2025 through 2028. So Barry Odom, you can say what you like about him. You can say what you like about Purdue football. But he's absolutely right about what he said about Indiana football. Like, you got to schedule tough opponents. You got to get that fan base excited for something. Yes, Indiana fans, they have a lot to be excited about for Indiana football going into this year under Curt Cignetti. But going into the future, it's going to be a lot harder for the Indiana Hoosiers to get back to the postseason because, the bar's drawn and the playoff committee won't be as kind if they lose to one or two games, even to quality opponents. And plus, like I said, won't get that SEC treatment because they're in the Big Ten and they're Indiana football. Because the NCAA, they love themselves programs that make money. That's just the point of it. And Barry Odom, he hit the nail on, Barry Odom, he said something very smart. We, regardless of who our opponents have, we try to use these games in non-conference to get better. And what better way to improve than to play quality non-conference opponents? That's something that I think he is sending that message to Indiana, and that's something that Indiana football needs to think more about going forward. So, in conclusion, what Barry Odom said, say what you will about Barry Odom and say what you will about Purdue. Make fun of Purdue football all you like. But you know what? He's not wrong about what he said about Indiana football. You want to prove yourself, you want to be the best, you got to go out there and you got to schedule the best and beat the best. All right, shifting gears. Okay, earlier today, or this morning when I woke up, I was scrolling through Twitter, all that stuff, looking through social media, and then a familiar name actually popped up on X, or Twitter as it's formerly known. A former NASCAR driver by the name of Mark Martin, a NASCAR legend too, who won 40 times in his career. His name was trending all over X today. And in case you're wondering, from what I understand, it was because of the things that were said about him. So earlier today, on a radio show, I believe and this is according to Twitter, on Sirius XM Radio, on track. So you had two people on this show. It was called, so something was brought to our attention here. So it was a Sirius XM show on track featuring Danielle Trotta, or Trotta, however you pronounce it, and Larry McReynolds, who is a smart guy and been around NASCAR for a while. So a X page by the name of Mega Doomer brought this attention to Mark Martin. He said, "Hey, Larry McReynolds and Danielle Trodas, they said some things about it. They were calling you out on their show as a guy who as a guy on the playoff committee who said that, who's crying for changes. So that's what got the new attention. And then Mark Martin responded and said that, responded to this tweet too. I'll see if I can find it real quick. But there was a retweet. Let me see if I can find it real quick. So Mark Martin responded to Mega Doomer's tweet, if I can find it. So Mark Martin responded. He said they want a system that is different from what the majority of NASCAR Cup fans want. I just want the majority of fans to get what they want. Mark Martin, Mark Martin back in those days, he was a man of the people. Like, he was a great race car driver, but a fan favorite too, a man of the people. And so what happened is, then there was kind of a back and forth conversation. Mega Doomer, also, who is a Twitter account that I'm quoting right now, he posted what the radio show said and like the audio from that show too. I'll see if I can find it. And then, there's a couple more guys joining the conversation, and then there was a reply from one of the hosts of this radio show by the name of Daniel Troda. So earlier now here's something that was said. I'll quote it. Like, Daniel Troda said in this segment of On Track that, there's a committee, a playoff committee made up of current NASCAR drivers. At least that's what I heard. And then she also went on to say, and then there's one driver that has just been calling for change, like that has been the most vocal. For lack of better words, it's not 100% what they said. And then Larry McReynolds went on to say, let me guess, this was a driver that had not won a championship. And she said something like, yes, and and Larry McReynolds said, of course, which, that, for a lot of NASCAR fans, that did not roll over well. But it did not get the attention as much as what Danielle Troda posted in response to Mark Martin. Here's what she said finally. I'm finally going to get to it. Check time real quick. So, I'm quoting Danielle Troda right now. Mark, I love you, but what we got is a whole lot better than what we used to do. We need a playoff. We need eliminations. We need to reward winning and consistency. This format does it all and is highly entertaining. And I am just going to tell you right now, sports fans, I know Danielle Troda, she's committed to what she's talking about. She's committed to covering NASCAR. But I just got to say, this is a pretty much rinse and repeat cycle of an extremely horrendous take. First of all, yes, maybe this format is entertaining, but it's not entertaining to the true fans of the sport. That's one that we disagree on. And then she said we need a playoff. We need eliminations. We need to reward winning and consistency. She's right about this. We do need to reward winning and consistency. But guess what? This current playoff format does not do either of those two teams. It does not reward the winner of the most races every season, nor does it reward the most consistent driver. The driver that won the championship last year, Joey Logano, had an average finish of 17th. That most seasons, that is not going to win you a championship. Yet it did for Logano. But the thing is, here's the thing. First of all, if you read the audio, they don't exactly allude to Mark Martin, okay? It could have been Denny Hamlin that they were talking about too as the driver, and that would not surprise me if it was either Denny Hamlin or maybe even a guy like Dan Earnhardt Jr. who's retired. It could have, if I had to guess, it was a current driver. But whether or not it was Mark Martin or not becomes that is, in a way, irrelevant. The thing is, the way they spoke of it, and I'll make sure I give you guys kind of the post where this all stems from. This comes off as a call-out. This comes off as two NASCAR journalists, one journalist and a guy who's been around the sport for a while. This comes out as calling out the drivers. It does not come off as friendly, and it lacks a bit of cordiality. Or it doesn't come off as being cordial, if I had to be honest. Or that's just my take. But here's the thing. In a way, it feels like that Larry Mack and Daniel Trotta called out Mark Martin. And you know what? Mark Martin is the second NASCAR legend in recent times to call out NASCAR on their format, which is not good. This format, no, it does not work. It is disgusting. It's terrible. It's only good for entertainment of like the corporations and NASCAR itself. But the fans are not entertained about it, and neither are the drivers. Richard Petty said, this format does not work. Like, winning you're in does not work. Something along the lines of that. Now Mark Martin has said that, you know what, the fans do not like this format. I just want the fans to get what they want, or the majority of it. And if you look at the retweets or the reposts of Daniel Trotta's response to this, it will prove without a doubt the majority of NASCAR fans do not like this format and do not want this. Basically, what Daniel Trotta posted, you can call this, you know what? Just say what it is. It's gaslighting. I know Daniel Trotta didn't mean to do it, but this comes off as gaslighting. In addition to basically calling out Mark Martin and other old school NASCAR drivers, and even current drivers like Denny Hamlin, this response that she posted gaslights the NASCAR fan base. And then on top of this, Mark Martin actually reposted this tweet, and he simply said three things. No, we don't. They don't, or no, they don't. Mark Martin, he was one of those old school drivers, great driver, and knew how to relate to the fans. In fact, Mark Martin relates to the NASCAR fan base way better than guys like Larry McReynolds and Daniel Trotta. And look, I respect Larry McReynolds and the work he's done in NASCAR, but what he said on this show was not a good take. It came off as calling out drivers. I know they didn't. They said they wouldn't mention. They also said they wouldn't mention names. Like, we're not going to mention names. Like Daniel herself said, we wouldn't mention names. But you know what? This is one of those times where, you know what? Just say the name. Just say who it was. All right? Say their name. Because in this case, either way, it comes off as disrespectful. And honestly, this is just another one of those cases where basically we got, you know what, NASCAR has in addition to having a road course NASCAR's got all sorts of controversies going on this year. They have had an interesting year. You've got the road course controversy, and now NASCAR is having media controversies. We just got a media system that just refuses to acknowledge what everyone else has to say and is only comfortable with people that agree with them. All right? I'm sure there's some fans that do love the chase format, but those fans that's the minority of NASCAR fans. The majority, when you read the comments, they don't like this format. It's terrible. And then Daniel Trotta went on to say this. Sorry to disappoint those who made false assumptions, but I never mentioned or referenced Mark Martin, which is true. She never alluded to Mark Martin in that podcast, which she had yesterday, when a caller asked about playoff format. I didn't know Mark was on the playoff committee until we spoke by phone after the show. Okay, so Mark Martin is on the committee, and she shows her respect, and let's strive to be better to each other and enjoy the sport we all and love. Well, you know what? I'm just going to say this to Daniel Trotta. You first. That starts with you. All right? What you said to Mark Martin and what you said about the playoff format and everyone liking it, that comes off as gaslighting. All right? Strive to be better to each other and enjoy the sport. You know what? You want people to do that? Start with yourself. You first. That is what I have to say to this. So, hey, in conclusion of this subject, what a NASCAR legend tells you that something does not work, as something as simple as a playoff format, you listen. Because Mark Martin is a guy that has been around NASCAR for a long, long time. Great driver, won a lot of races. He's a Hall of Famer. When you got guys like him and Richard Petty telling you that, hey, what is going on is not working, alarm bells should be ringing in NASCAR, and they should be listening. But you know what? This is who NASCAR is. They don't listen to the legends. I mean, if they don't listen to legends, what chances are that they're going to listen to their fans? They only listen. Right now, NASCAR is showing, and the media of NASCAR, they've just shown only one thing. They only listen to people who agree with them. And everyone else who disagrees with them, they either call them out or, in even the slightest amount, they gaslight them. Simple as that. So, I get it. Perhaps they're on NASCAR's payroll. I don't know the particulars of that. But if you pay attention to NASCAR, by the way, I have not watched NASCAR in a long time. I used to growing up, but this playoff format, yes, was one of the reasons I got out, because it's part of a list of gimmicks. These gimmicks are hurting the sport more than it's helping it grow. But you know what? NASCAR, they love the gimmicks, and you know what? It's their choice. They can do what they please. It's just too bad, because guys like Mark Martin, who have the respect of NASCAR fans and other drivers who help make the sport what it is. You know, they have great ideas, and NASCAR and its media, they just continue to close the door on them. That's where I'm going to leave this subject. On to this day in sports history. Like, hey, one more thing, we should be treating legends like Mark Martin and Richard Petty a whole lot better on social media and off social media. Much better than we have been. Those guys deserve a lot more respect because they helped build NASCAR. Finally now, on this day, the 23rd of July, 1925, the great Lou Gehrig of the New York Yankees and the luckiest man hits the first of 23 career Grand Slams. All right, sports fans, that is all I got for All right, one more thing I want to say about the third and final subject. What we saw from Daniel Trotta and Larry McReynolds, this is a reflection of one of the biggest problems that we have in society today. Inside of sports and outside of sports. We just continue, as humans, to tear each other apart instead of, simply just agreeing to disagree. Or, I don't agree with you, but I respect your opinion. The way they responded to the way that Larry Mack and Danielle Trotta responded, whether it was to Mark Martin or Denny Hamlin, it comes off as just somebody dismissing someone else's opinion rather than trying to talk with them and say, all right, I don't agree with it, but I respect our differences. Let's work together. That's just that is what this whole thing comes off as. Big time. All right, sports fans, now, officially, that is all I got for this week's Waxon Wednesday. Anything you want to say? Anything you want to say about what I said today? Feel free to leave it in the comments below. Any questions you have, feel free to leave them below. And I will see you guys in the studio for Friday Roundtable this week. This is Jake Waxman from Two Guys Talk Sports, signing off.